tuberculosis. There is a misconception that this is a poor man's disease. It isn't really. And to bust all the myths and talk in greater detail about tuberculosis, I have with me Dr. G.C. Kilnani, who is a well-known pulmonologist now associated with Delhi's PSRI hospital. Dr. Kilnani, thank you so much for your time. I want to begin by asking you, why is that there is very little conversation in our common circles about tuberculosis and the disease that it is? Why is that there is no fear or panic or urgency or emergency attached to this disease?
So, Ms. Sneha, you have to go back to the pre-anti-tubercular era when tuberculosis patients were sent to the sanatorium to die or survive or whatever. And it is a contagious disease, and it always historically have had a stigma. Somebody had tuberculosis was actually isolated. But over a course of time now, 40% of Indian adults have latent tuberculosis, and as you said, more than 2.5 lakh people are dying. It is no more a disease of poor and downtrodden who live in crowded environment. Rich of the richest get tuberculosis. But still, when a person is diagnosed with tuberculosis, he generally doesn't disclose it, to his near and dear friends. So therefore, there is less talk about tuberculosis as compared to the COVID which we had. But time has changed. People are now a little more open about it. They know that they have tuberculosis. They don't try to conceal it. People don't look down upon them because there isn't a family or a friend of people who haven't had tuberculosis, richest of the richest, and I could cite some celebrities also. So therefore things have changed. But a lot to be done. As you know that Prime Minister already started a campaign of TB Mukt Bharat. So we are marching ahead of that, and people are more aware of this disease. But there are certain peculiarities that we will be talking about as we progress in the discussion.
Dr. Kilnani, I want to ask you, the misconception really is, and the popular opinion really is that perhaps tuberculosis is a disease that only affects the lungs. Incessant coughing for days together is associated with tuberculosis and nothing else. Why is that? Because tuberculosis, our viewers must know, is a disease that can affect any other organ and every other organ of your body, isn't it?
So we should understand that tuberculosis enters through the lung, and 80 to 85% of cases of tuberculosis is still lung tuberculosis. It is easier to diagnose, easier to treat, and it is of more concern because only people with lung tuberculosis can transmit disease. However, having said that, tuberculosis can affect any and every organ of the body, starting from the brain to bones, to eyes, to lymph nodes, covering of the heart and intestine, urinary system, and even genital system. So every and any system can be affected. If you talk about brain and bone tuberculosis, it's not only difficult to diagnose, it's difficult to treat also because the treatment is much longer. But historically it was called chest and tuberculosis. Our degree used to be chest and tuberculosis some time back because it was thought that it affects lung and lymph nodes. But as the diagnostic facilities are available, CT scans, MRI and so on and so forth, we have realized that every and any organ can be affected. So it is important for not only for the patient, but for the doctors also to be aware of that.
Dr. Kilnani, a lot of people ask this question, especially when we talk about infectious diseases, that what should be done to prevent it? What can I do to stay away from tuberculosis?
So, the best way to prevent tuberculosis is to treat patients who are diagnosed with tuberculosis. For that, it is important to suspect. Now, come to think of it that if every patient in India or all over the world is diagnosed and treated, and within 6 weeks of treatment, the person becomes non-contagious. So if you treat all the patients with pulmonary tuberculosis, lung tuberculosis, and other forms of tuberculosis, the transmission would stop. Now, given the fact that prevalence of tuberculosis is so high, you may be traveling in the bus or elevators or in the crowded places, in the market. You don't know who is suffering from tuberculosis. This is because of the fact that it is a chronic disease and patient, suppose somebody has cough for a period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, he doesn't get himself tested. He may continue for months and years with tuberculosis with some symptoms, which could be little amount of fever and cough, but he would be transmitting disease. So therefore, there is nothing that you can do to prevent exposure unless it is the community is treated at large. I hope I am making my point very, very clear
Yes.
about it. So therefore, having said that, it is important that person who is diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis, he wears a mask. That will give protection to others for a period of 6 to 8 weeks after starting the treatment. Once his sputum turns negative or if he becomes asymptomatic after 8 weeks, then he need not wear mask because by then the person becomes non-contagious. So if I could summarize it, it is very important. The case detection is very important. Diagnosis is very important. And uninterrupted treatment is very important because uninterrupted treatment not only leads to development of MDR tuberculosis or drug-resistant tuberculosis, it also leads to more transmission of disease in the community.
You know, India eliminates or plans rather to eliminate tuberculosis in the next 2 years, 2025. Many say it's a very unrealistic expectation. What is your assessment about the work that India is doing in this direction, sir?
So this government has done an amazing work by setting a goal. Unless you set a goal, you cannot strive or you cannot achieve. I know instead of 2030, the goal has been set to 2025. There has been little sort of depressing thing as the COVID came. All this diagnostic facilities and treatment facilities had to slow down. It was a need of the hour. But the way the government has provided facilities not only by microscopy but even the biotechnological and genetic this thing. If that program is runs smoothly and intensely, then there is a possibility of achieving control of tuberculosis. Elimination and control are two different things. One should realize. Like if you think that America or other developed countries has zero tuberculosis, that's not true. It is very rare, but it does happen there also. Another thing which is a little complicated, that once you have a latent tuberculosis, what is called as tuberculosis infection in the body when the person is healthy, it can break away anytime, even after 30 years, about 20 years. So this program, even when achieved by 2025, this will have to continue for a long time for this to be under control. So I am very hopeful that, with the kind of facilities provided, we should be able to achieve that.
Also, I want to ask you, why is India just at such a high risk? Why are we just so susceptible? And how big a difference is the increasing population and increasing pollution going to make this? Given that we are more populated, as in compared to China now, will our problems vis-a-vis controlling this infection and controlling the rise in the number of cases, will also that get affected because of a rising populations?
Yeah, we need to understand how tuberculosis spreads. I say that now it is seen in all strata of population, but whenever there is overcrowding, whenever there are non-ventilated areas, if the air circulation is not there, whenever there are 10 people staying in one room, and whenever there is undernourishment, then the chances of transmission of tuberculosis are very high. Compounded with it, If the facilities for diagnosis is not there, person may be suffering for years together, months and years together. Not only that he suffers, but he transmits the disease. Another thing is that lack of awareness, which is actually going away now. What people do is that they start treatment for tuberculosis within 3 to 6 weeks time. Person becomes asymptomatic, and when the person becomes asymptomatic, he stops taking medication, and after few months it again resurfaces. To circumvent that, the government has implemented what is called a directly observed therapy short course, that is called DOTS, where there is a person, which could be Anganwadi worker, which could be a friend, which could be a shopkeeper, who actually oversees the intake of anti-tubercular drug for a period of 6 months. What is another change has occurred is that instead of intermittent therapy, now the daily therapy is being given. So why India is, it's not that Indians are more susceptible to tuberculosis than the Western world. It is because the sheer prevalence of the disease in the community, and also the overcrowding and undernourishment and lack of awareness, which is now going away, that this disease is more prevalent in India.
Sir, my last question to you has got to do with the vaccine. Right now, we know that the BCG vaccine is given to protect infants against tuberculosis, but that protection is also for a very limited period of time. If you could talk to us a little about the importance of this vaccine, and what is the kind of work in the research area that has been done to develop more vaccines to control this infection?
So BCG vaccine should not be compared with smallpox vaccine, which single-handedly led to eradication of smallpox from the world. Every vaccine has a different level of efficacy. We know about COVID vaccine. It does give some protection against infection, but mainly it gives protection against severity. Similarly, the efficacy of BCG vaccine is not 100%. It is a time-honored vaccine. It reduces the incidence of tuberculosis, but it does not bring it to zero. Also, the protection with the BCG vaccine wanes off over a period of years and decades as compared to other vaccines. So BCG vaccine efficacy is not 100%. That we need to understand. That is the reason that despite the fact that BCG vaccination is given in India at the time of birth, the disease is not still well controlled. Having said that, a lot of research is going on and coming out with different other types of vaccine. As we know that the vaccine could be killed vaccine, live attenuated vaccine, DNA vaccine, so on and so forth. A lot of work is going on, but nothing has come out as something which I can say that this vaccine is now more useful than BCG vaccine. So as time comes, we hope that some vaccine will be available, but today only the BCG vaccine is with us.
All right. Dr. Kelani, I'm going to thank you for that conversation. Very enlightening. You've told us a couple of things that we must remember. BCG vaccine protecting children in the age in which it is given. So we must in fact ensure that vaccination is given. Also, overcrowding and undernutrition. These are two important factors that will make one susceptible to this infection. Do not ignore the symptoms, is what the experts have to say about tuberculosis. Thank you so much for connecting with us, viewers. Dr. Kelani, appreciate your time.
My pleasure.